Welcome to today's InService podcast segment, produced by the Service Council. My name is John Carroll. I'm the CEO and founder of the Service Council, and I am incredibly pleased to be joined by two colleagues. I've got Alan Schaefer, who is the CEO and founder of Banding People Together, and I also have Gerardo Pelayo, my colleague from the Service Council, who this quarter joined us in the role of Vice President of Research and Advisory. And I got to tell you, I am so excited for two reasons. One, Alan is one of the coolest guys I've ever met. Two, Gerardo is taking on the responsibility of delivering today's Q&A. So I think our audience will be very excited to learn that as well. Alan, warm welcome to you. Gerardo, thank you for joining as well.
Awesome. I am very happy to be here. I woke up today and said, this is a get to, not a have to. So thank you for that, gentlemen.
Outstanding. Outstanding. So today's discussion is built around this topic that we think is really important, that we continue to hear members and partners alike talk about the challenges and sufferings of change management. And they don't have to be sufferings. And today we're going to dive into some opportunities to enable a frictionless change management process within your organization. So we're talking about, is your change management process out of key? Today's session is interactive. If you'd like to pose questions or reactions, please comment from LinkedIn, and we will try to build that into today's discussion. We'll take a moment to read and react as we go. And today's segment will be recorded. So if you'd like to revisit it, share it with colleagues, whatever you subscribe to, whatever channel you get your podcast from, it'll be present there. It's present on our LinkedIn page. It's present on our website, etc. You can find it many different places. And without further ado, let's go ahead and get into it. Alan, I know you have come to love you. Let's get the community to come to love you as well. A lot of the community met you at last year's symposium. Talk a little bit about yourself, an introduction, and what is it that Banding People Together is doing in the world?
Well, thank you. Yeah, and I'm so grateful to be part of this community. You have no idea. I feel like I've stumbled into this like goodness, and for someone that loves to learn, this has just been amazing for me. I'm the CEO and founder of Banding People Together. We're a performance improvement consultancy, essentially, and we help people get in the groove, individually, organizationally, and in the groove. That's optimization. It's when we talk about optimization, we talk about all kinds of process things. We're the people side of optimization, people side of change, the people side of growth, and we are behaviorists at the core. We're former CEOs of publicly traded companies. We are scientists, Ph.D s, and people like me, maybe bringing a little bit more of a scarred but smarter, conventional band guy wisdom to the mix. And we work across industries just to help people go faster in the right way.
I love it. I love it. And we're gonna pick that and pull it apart in every which way we can today to get your knowledge shared for today's listening audience. Because, sitting through your keynote last year, people walked away jazzed, excited, but also just informed. And so looking forward to trying to piece that out today in today's discussion. Gerardo, I'll turn to you as we dive into today's discussion. We have a planned Q&A that I'm really excited about. So on to you.
Great. Thank you for that introduction, John, and welcome, Alan. So as we get into the topic, the first thing I want to do is set a little bit of the stage because we see all these emerging technologies, but not just that, shifting customer expectations, different challenges on the workforce. And one of the things, the most important thing actually that has come up in the service leaders agenda is service innovation, thinking differently about things. And that is usually met with excitement. But then where it gets interesting is that innovation often requires change in order to materialize into something, right? So you talked about people. Let's start there. What are the barriers that you see that people develop in response to change?
So, that's a great question. And if I can just speak just for a moment to the innovation piece of it, I attended a continuing education program at Vanderbilt University years ago on innovation, and they talked about these constraints of innovation. And the first one is self. The second is team. The third is the organization. The fourth is the industry, and the fifth is society. And just the idea of kind of that self and team, behaviorally speaking, is some of the things that we'll be able to get at. But ultimately, people don't love change. They don't love to be shocked. But it's not change itself. The real magic happens when you get to a understanding of what is causing the resistance to change. It's not change itself. And that's some of what I hope we can get into on the call today.
Very good, very good. So we'll get into how does that, what shape do those barriers take? But perhaps the best example is AI, a big topic nowadays, and it's one that is perceived, especially by the front line, by the workforce, as a big risk. Is it going to take away my my job? So that's a good example of what a barrier could look like.
Yeah.
Why do people react in this way to new technologies that are perhaps not as well understood, that are just getting started? Is there a pattern for why we act the way we act?
There's absolutely a pattern. And for those of you listening, and who've been through big change initiatives or transformations, it's probably not new thinking for you to go, oh yeah, in the absence of information, people will make up their own, and it's generally not favorable. But there really is a reason for that all kinds of research supports. And the lack of clarity, our brain fires from the same place as mistrust. So let me share that again. In the lack of clarity, our brain fires from the same place as mistrust. So I'm someone in the field, and all I know is I'm hearing whispers that some change is coming. We're going to change our system, how we do this. The dispatch is going to be different. The tablet I use when I walk into a customer's house, whatever that is. And I'm already anticipating, because I don't know what's really coming, I'm making up and defaulting to the worst. And that actually creates a feeling, and those feelings are not generally rational. And so when you're dealing with irrational feelings, you are now in a hotbed, a petri dish for conflict and misalignment. And I think that's the opportunity for organizations to think a little more granularly around change, which is like, people don't want to be shocked. And here's the other piece: bias and subjectivity. Like, how do you convince someone in the field that this is going to be a seamless integration when the last 3 they've gone through was mind-numbing, ever-loving pain for them? Yeah. Showing up at their dinner table conversation every night going, I don't think I want this job anymore. Mm-hmm. So I think there's a real opportunity. And I think one of the challenges is, I don't know who owns that in an organization. I think that's a real challenge. Who owns that? Is it HR? I don't think so.
Alan, you bring up some really, really good points about the scar tissue of change, that we have come accustomed to change in many respects and remember the pain of that change. And I relate change in business to what I've seen and witnessed in my personal life. And you see over my shoulder over here, one of my kiddos on the wall. I've got 4 kids, and when I take them to the playground and I don't condition them for the change before ripping them away from that playground, they turn into literal aliens.
Yeah,
literal aliens. And I think you're right. That there's a memory there. There's a scar tissue there that is achieved over time in terms of pattern, where change is met with the negative side of it because of a previous experience. And I think you hit the nail on the head there. I think there's certainly a little bit of scar tissue to dig through, for sure.
And that's a feeling. And I just want to say, look, it's tough for the band guy to show up and say the word feeling, not be dismissed as, oh, this touchy feely, whatever. But here's what the research says also, and from our, one of my partners who does this in the public sector: facts don't matter if you don't manage the feelings. And maybe the real safe, scalable bet is managing feelings, but one size doesn't fit all. And again, who owns it? That's, I think, a big thing for the community to think about.
Absolutely. Yeah, and that's a great quote. Facts don't matter if you don't manage the feelings. So you also mentioned the part about ownership and who owns this. So the lazy answer perhaps would be to say, well, people just don't want to change, and that's why we're not succeeding. That's why we're not able to move forward. Instead, a more introspective answer. In your experience, have you identified any recurrent examples of how do people show that they're not willing to, that they're not in the right state of mind to change, that that their feelings are not in the right place?
Well, I mean, it shows up in rogue behaviors. It shows up in a lack of engagements. It shows up in, hey, I'm going to go against the grain and just do things how I've always done them until I get caught. you know, there's a lot of things, but again, I think that there's a more foundational challenge in all of this beyond even who owns this, which is, are we giving people a voice in the change is one of the things that I see it missing. Here's this top down thing. And I mean, if you look at like engagement scores and things like that, one of the markers in engagement scores you see is like, does senior leadership care about us, or does senior leadership have an idea of what we're experiencing and whatnot? And so often those are very, very low scores. There's this like perception of the ivory tower. And, the whole idea that we're doing things that are impacting our employees, and especially all the way down to the field level for someone who's walking into someone's house to interact with a customer. And we're not getting their voice in the conversation in a way that is meaningful. Okay. Meaningful being the key word. Again, now where does that fall? Does that fall in your comms? Does it call in HR? No. I mean, that's another thing. Like, who owns that? Yeah. Who really owns that? And I just don't see it being owned.
Alan, I just want to comment behind your thoughts there. The concept of, frontline and not just leadership involved in change came through quite clearly with respect to our Voice of the Field Service Engineer survey. We asked questions around their belief that they have a role in innovation. 40% didn't believe they had a role in innovation. We asked their belief that management reacts and makes changes based on their feedback for improvement, and it was even greater. It was 6 out of 10. And I think you bring up a huge point here in terms of involvement of not just leadership in the change, but also the front line. And that's a two-way street. We had a great podcast on this segment here. Jim Bone, former Johnson Controls guy, change management guy, talked about change management, and he talked about being an architect of change. Management can't just say, this is what we're doing, and then go about and do it. And then it becomes the new flavor of the month to the front line. And by the way, management just can't say, here's a change, we're going to do it, and I'll see you at the end. They have to become an architect. They have to be there for the teardown, the rebuild, and the communication and the execution. So
yeah, and what you're talking about for me is physics. Yeah. You're talking about force, even though it's not intentional force. Like top down without any feedback from the field is force. And force, I don't use absolutes very often. Force is almost always met with resistance. And resistance can be everything from overt, I'm not doing that, to I'm walking, I'm quitting, to rogue behaviors, all kinds of things. And I think the other thing that's really curious about this is, we lean on our leaders to drive this change, and you just got to drive change and you got to manage change. I don't think anyone's given them a reasonable how. I really don't. I mean, telling someone to embrace change is just like saying, don't be scared of spiders anymore. Well, good luck. Don't be scared of heights anymore. So I think there's this lack of understanding and respect for the deep behavioral complexity that's going on. And we try to have these frameworks that are more of a one size fits all. And John, I mean, look, you take your 4 kids to the park and something's changed. They all need a different message.
Totally.
Right? They all have their own feeling about what it is they're experiencing. And if you don't do it, you have a different experience. And
sometimes you have to incentivize the change. Hey kids, we're leaving the playground. Would you like to go get ice cream?
yes, I'm coming out with you because I would love some ice cream to be included in that mix. But yeah, so I think that there's an opportunity in this conversation for those in the community listening. Like, what are, hopefully we'll get to some, like, what are some just basic foundational things we can start thinking about to tune out some of the noise that's happening in all this. And, I think there's a mitigating the risk of what we know is coming down the road. Because again, insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. But I think you also have to ask yourself, if you are involved in driving some kind of transformation, how much ahead do I want to get ahead of it? And what level of investment are we willing to make so that the downstream impact, we're not dealing with the crazy stuff that we complain about?
Yeah. So let's dive into that. And one interesting quote, very related to what you're saying, I found in a recent Harvard Business Review article, says that for all the talk we have about managing change, we're very bad at being with change. And then it goes on to say that how we feel about change depends on whether we have developed our mental muscles for uncertainty, which you also talked about. So in this, one size fits all is probably not the right strategy. There's some that advocate for, well, you have to set the rules and set the guardrails and force change. Or otherwise, you have to convince people that my way and the way that I'm pushing is the right one. Have you encountered this? Are these good ideas? Is there a different approach?
That's a great question.
That you've seen is good.
Well, that's a great question. Before I answer that one properly, like, let me ask you, gentlemen, do you like to be convinced of anything? No, we don't want to be convinced, just like we don't want to be sold to. And so really, there's a different word here that I would like to share and introduce, and that word is influence. And I think influence is an important word, and it's misunderstood. And at Banding, we have a very particular lens on influence. Influence is not persuasion for us. It's not manipulation. Influence is creating the conditions to get to clarity. Because if we get to clarity, right, brain's now not firing crazy, right? Brain is not firing crazy. And so this idea of influence, of just, for starters, are we seeing the same thing? There was a brilliant gentleman named Daniel Kahneman, who the world just lost, and he wrote a great book called Noise. And Noise says this, when you have bias or subjectivity, you have noise. That's it. And so it's not about getting everyone to see the right thing. The real magic is, how do you get people to see the same thing? And the reason that is so difficult is because of our wirings are so different. And here at Banding, we look at personality on a really deep trait level. Like, I can tell you, there are people listening to this right now that if I said to you, how many of you, raise your hand, if you have someone that every time you have a meeting with, they go, yeah, I got it. And they go off and they basically go write a different song, make a different record. They come back, they show you what they did, and you're surprised. Well, they are wired to reinterpret. And so just even from a telephone game perspective, it's like with each day that passes, they're going to drift further and further from the clarity, right? And all of a sudden now we're misaligned again. And misalignment is conflict, by the way. And so this idea of influence, real influence individually or at scale, right, is getting to clarity. And here's the thing that we got to reach back for from early in our chat. Part of getting that clarity is managing the feelings of people being impacted. That's a deep idea.
So, it is. And you made me think about something else, the other part of the other side of the communication that we haven't really talked about yet, which is listening. How should we listen for those feelings, so that we know that? Yep.
Well, so here's what's so fascinating, because in the world of communication, what gets pounded on people is like, we got to be better listeners. I think what's daunting and challenging about that, there are some folks who are listening right now that are wired to go super, super fast, right? and they're just go, 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 go. And based on our research and our experience, they have the most challenge with active listening because they're multitaskers, because they're always just trying to get so much more done, right? I think when we talk about listening, I think we think about this. I think about, but I think we can listen and still hear what we want to hear based on what we're feeling and what we're reacting to. I mean, you can send something out to the field that says it's going to be okay and we're going to do X, Y, and Z. And you have 1,000 field techs that can hear something all different. And so I think when we talk about maybe signals and we look at engagement and those kinds of things, I think there's an opportunity all the way. And I was really thinking about this ahead of our time together. I think about, I think about the person that came to fix my stove or fix my cable or my internet connection. And by the way, I have to say, I never thought about that until I was part of this community, and had vastly different experiences, by the way, which was incredible. But, I think there's probably an opportunity that if from the mothership, if we're putting things out relative to change, I think there's something all the way down to the supervisor level in the field to say, all right, here's what I think is coming. Here's some context. It's going to hit all of you a little different. The 10 people that I'm supervising, the 10 trucks that are going out in my patch, and we probably need to huddle up and just have a chat about it and get a gauge and a barometer of like, just what do you think about it? Without it, just as simple as that. Just so you're getting one step ahead of whatever is coming. It's like a buffer, right? And again, like, how do we arm those people in the field to be that face for the organization, for the large organization, and how do we enable them to go, oh, okay, one size doesn't fit all, and we're gonna share this thing that's coming. We're gonna make sure part of the influence is we want you to be heard in this. We want you to be heard in this, and this is what this looks like. Like, they need a playbook for that, an influencing playbook. And it doesn't come in just let me put out the memo of let me just put out the memo of the comms people are going to put out the new process thing we're doing. I mean, it's just, but you have to invest the time in it, and you have to believe in the value of it to do it. So how do you get people to do that? I don't know. That's a big question.
Yeah. And as you were talking to this, I was reflecting on some of the findings that we've gotten through our surveys. And a thing I love is the whole track is about getting in front of the problem, how to prevent the resistance to change, to getting in the way from that transformation. And the reflection I was doing is on the things that a number of service leaders are measuring. And the largest concentration of the metrics that we see across the board are still on the lagging indicators. What happened, even from an employee engagement perspective? Were they happy? Are they thinking about leaving? Did they stay or did they not? And there's not as much focus on those early signals on, are they participating today? Are they engaged? So I think there is a point to be made in aligning this mindset of getting in front, being early, and also how we behave on a day-to-day and what we measure, the incentives that we put within our organizations.
So I've actually met, as a guest, am I allowed to ask you all a question?
Yeah.
Okay. In the field, for the field supervisors, what is their defined role, if any, in the engagement conversation? Does that exist?
A customer or employee?
I'm saying employee on that. So I'm a supervisor, and I've got my 15 field techs that I'm supervising in the field. What's my role in their engagement?
That's a great question. We would advocate that the ones that are doing a good job of driving engagement are the ones that are proactively outreaching to this community, speaking with them often, not just for the purpose of, the day-to-day and empathizing with what they encounter, but also from the point of view of getting to know them, right? Those one-off calls out of the blue just to get to know you, put a relationship to the discussion. Do I think that that's a framed aspect of the supervisor's role in every organization? Probably not.
Yeah, and so what an opportunity, right?
Yeah.
What an opportunity. And I'll tell you, it doesn't have to be that daunting. But I do think there is something pretty profoundly interesting and this we see across industries. Generally speaking, and in a lot of cases, the person that was really great at, loading the truck, building a widget, doing something on the assembly line, fixing the thing in someone's home fastest, they get made a supervisor. And in many cases, the same thing that made them great at the task is not what makes them great at managing, leading, or engaging people. And I think that is a bit of a talent conundrum. But I think there's something really easy. And Gerardo, as you were kind of talking about this, how do we get ahead of it? Well, there's some basic intrinsic human motivators at play that you don't have to be a behaviorist like me or a rocket scientist to figure out. This is in any human interaction. And at the core of getting ahead of engagement is, do people have a voice? Do they feel like they have a voice?
Yeah.
That's the first thing. And by the way, sometimes we don't have a voice just at speed. Hey, you know what? I'm supposed to have my one-on-one with my manager, and for 3 times in a row, they were too busy for me. Okay, my voice is gone, right? So do people have a voice? And what's the mechanism for having a voice? What is the operational cadence in the field to go, hey, we're going to huddle up once a month and just make sure that we're just being heard on the things that we're seeing out there and experiencing so we can do something about it. That is so cheap and so easy, right? So that's one thing. The second thing is around the engagement game is, am I contributing in a way that's meaningful to me? Basic intrinsic human motivator. Because if I'm not, I'm going to look somewhere else where I can. Yeah. And you can't do that if you don't have a voice. And I think all the supervisor has to say is, well, are you contributing in a way that's meaningful to you? Someone who's going out service call after service call after service call, coming back with better ways to do things to make it a better customer experience and be more optimized for the company, that doesn't have that platform even shared in a way that it goes anywhere, you're losing. You're losing, and you're going to lose into your competitor. And then the third piece, go ahead.
Yeah, no, please continue.
And the third piece of this is, so you have voice, you have contribution. And again, in that game, you got to be driving to the hoop of clarity. And those 3 things, people will be engaged. You don't need to spend $1 million on an engagement survey to figure that out. And I don't think it takes the band guy to tell you, this is some simple stuff. And in my experience and in our experience, these huge, audacious, complex problems are solved by simple. Simple cuts it to its knees. And I would challenge anyone listening today to go, is it really that hard to have our supervisors in the field just have a different gauge and barometer, a new lens on, do they have a voice? Do they have a contribution? And is there clarity? I don't think that's tough.
Love those viewpoints. I really do. And, one of the things that I reflect back on, because we're talking about behavior in terms of it enabling change or the importance of it in change to a degree. And you talked about different profiles within the context of your symposium keynote last year. And I think I was somewhere in between Frank Sinatra and someone else. I forget whom. But my question for you is behavior, human behavior, is your profile, is that static or does it evolve? Because they talk about your taste buds change every 7 years. Does your behavior change similarly?
Oh, yeah.
Are we on this evolutionary path?
Well, you're about to get a taste of like the swaggery band guy for a minute, because I've fought with a lot of academics over this. I fought with a lot of folks over this. This idea of kind of retesting and validity and certain testing. Man, if you're not evolving, you're dying. This is Darwinian. And again, I think there's certain parts in our wiring that are just not really going to drastically change, but there are parts that will. And as we evolve and we grow, It changes. And you know, what's really interesting is when it comes to personality research, generally the Big Five personality factor, which is the gold standard for, you know, personality trait research, you know, usually it would take close to 10 years for someone to really significantly change in their traits. What's fascinating is post-COVID. COVID changed a lot of things in the world. And COVID, it's now it's been, now they're saying 2 years.
Jet fuel.
So, because people have just changed their lens and their value system and what's important and what they're willing to do. And, you know, and so again, for me as a person that has rewired dramatically, again, look, and we didn't talk about this, but banding exists because I was not a good leader and I was not a good collaborator. I was not amplifying voice. I was not maximizing contributions, and I sure as heck wasn't giving clarity. It was like, I'm going to beat my idea into you until you say yes and go, okay, Alan, shut up. That's why I have formed band members, you know? And so, yeah, we evolve, and we should be evolving, but that's not us changing who we are. You know, that's a good question, John.
Yeah, I love the viewpoints there. Gerardo, back to you. Sorry.
Yes. So great conversation so far. And I really like how you've taken the idea of influencing and really simplified the what, where we need to focus on with the voice, the contribution, and the clarity. But then the next step, and this is where I want to continue to pick your brain on, are there good guidelines, best practices that you can share with us that allow us to get to act before that point of no return, where it's already hard to capture the voice, it's already hard to make them feel that they have a contribution, that we've communicated the what's in it for me?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I will tell you this, you know, when you go in to do a record, you do what's called pre-production, right? You're not going and spending a lot of money on expensive studio time. You got these ideas, you're socializing. You might even go leave the studio, go play a couple shows somewhere, just see how these new songs and new arrangements are feeling, right? and here's the thing, the market wins. The market will tell you, right? And your market, if you're listening, is your people in the field. And what I would say is this: the moment that you decide that you're going to go do some big, huge overhaul, something or whatever, get people into the conversation early. Just get people in the conversation early. That's it. You know, and I mean, if the ship has sailed, the train has left the station, and now it's just this dropped on us, you're going to be managing feelings like we talked about. There's going to be the lack of clarity. But when you do that up front, there's something really interesting. And what we don't hear a lot about is maybe a broader influencing strategy. And the influencing, that's core to the influencing strategy, is like, just give them a seat at the table. Give them a seat at the table. Give them a voice. Because no matter what direction you go down, you can point and you can share, yeah, this is who we had in the mix. Yeah. We didn't have all of you, but you were represented here because we understand that you are impacted by our decisions. I mean, good grief. It baffles my mind that we don't think to do that. But again, we're driven by speed, driven by shareholder earnings, and cost cutting and all these kinds of things. And we want to go fast, fast, fast. And, you know, I learned something. One of my really great friends, a guy named Kenny Thomas, I played in bands with, I tour managed him, and Sean on our team at banding was his drummer. That's how I got to know Sean on our team. And he was, if you know the movie Black Hawk Down, he was one of the guys that was really in the fight in Mogadishu. And so I did a leadership development excursion out in Wyoming with a whole bunch of special ops, you know, folks who can, you know, kill you with a spoon. And one of the guys said to me, he goes, on the battlefield, slow is smooth and smooth is fast. On the battlefield, slow is smooth and smooth is fast. And for all of you type A's wired to go super fast, in the optimization game, smooth wins every time. Or you wind up fixing it in the mix and managing a bunch of stuff you don't want to manage. Again, that's the level of investment. What are you willing to make up front? The other thing is this. Let's say you bring some people in the field to the mix and they contribute. What an opportunity when we talk in the engagement game about recognition. hey, this is much different than, hey, you're going to get the parking space because you did whatever and people love you. No, like, here's someone, one of your colleagues that contributed to the conversation. They didn't have to even have the idea. They were in the mix to help us get to a place to make it feel great for you all in the field. Rocket. That's a different influence. And that's not force. And that's not convincing. And what it does is it mitigates the risk of the future person going, what in the world were those execs in the ivory tower thinking? They don't know what we're going through out here. You eliminate all that. But guess what? It starts down at the supervisor level and in the field going, hey, just so you know, they're starting to think about some things and they've asked me to have a conversation with you and get some ideas and feedback and thought. I mean, that is so cheap and easy. It just, again, it maddens my brain that we're not doing that enough.
Yeah, no, and especially because it's such a relevant thing. I was rereading on this statistic. Over 80% of organizations say they have some type of innovation initiative, and only 16% of them are successful at scaling it. So it tells us two things. One, almost everybody needs to be able to be comfortable and be smart about change. Very few are doing so successfully. And one of the lessons I take from what you've been sharing is that sometimes we come up with good answers for the wrong question. And but what I mean by that is putting the technology, the solutions, the different mechanisms, all that exciting and potentially useful things that are in front of us before really understanding what is it that we want to achieve. So to me, that's why it's so important that you help us simplify the concept of what do we need to be good at in order for change to achieve that smooth path, and then the step that follows, and I believe the answer will vary depending on the organization. This is me reflecting, not trying to put words in your mouth, Alan.
Sure.
But every organization might leverage technology to engage their teams in a different way, to make knowledge available, to drive a particular cadence that facilitates this two-way communication, but not forgetting that underlying objective.
Yeah, and it's interesting. So at banding, we teach a very particular idea, and now we all know the golden rule, right? The golden rule says, "I'm going to treat you how I want to be treated," and that's from our perspective, is a real blind spot, because it's like, I joke, I'll say, Sean on our team likes to be hit in the face with the pie when he makes a mistake. That doesn't mean that when I make a mistake, he can get out the pie. I mean, it's goofy, but it makes the point. We teach something called the platinum rule. Platinum rule says this: I'm going to treat you how you want to be treated. And we do that with our customers. We don't do that with each other. Over and over in 15 years of doing this and a wall of huge logos, I can tell you, we treat everybody out. We treat the customers great, but we don't treat our internal customers nearly the same. The caveat to this, though, and this is important, which is, in order to exercise the platinum rule, you have to know your audience. So like, I can tell you with great certainty in any effort, without very little effort in any transformation change effort, that even based on our personality research, I go, this person needs to, this person's going to feel this way, this person's going to feel this way, this person's going to feel this way. You can't give one size fits all. But the broad thing is just asking, hey, like, how's this hitting you? Like, they'll tell you. People want to tell you, but you have to create the conditions. Really, what we really, I think, need, and pardon the music analogies, guitar guy's going to get one over the goal line here, but we need producers for the change, not reducers. We need producers. And the producers create the conditions where people have a voice and they contribute and they know their part and they feel like they had a say in the arrangement of the song. That's it. When I brought in a song and I pounded it into the band, it was one thing. When I brought it in and I left space for the bass player, who happened to be my twin brother, go, Alan, I think the lyrics here are not as good as the other part of the song. Am I going to fight that, or am I going to go, okay, let's Let's think about what's not hitting you right. What's not feeling right for you? Because what I don't want is you being on stage in Biloxi, Mississippi Saturday night and going, oh, here's this part of the song that sucks, right? And so it's the same thing that's happened in the field. It's like, wow, this thing that just happens, this just doesn't feel good when I walk into the customer's home anymore, because it's one thing. And how do they not know this? I just think it's some pretty simple. I think we can start very broad, because I think we have to be really careful. And I don't want anyone listening to be overwhelmed. Yes, I live and die and study maniacally, like behavior on a level that's crazy at this point. That's just my jam. But we don't need to put that on people. And we need to keep some broad, universal, basic, intrinsic human motivators. If like, how are we amplifying voices? How are we maximizing contributions? And are we all driving to clarity? Like that. And are we getting ahead of it? And what is the communication / influencing cadence to allow us to go, okay, are we still on track? Are we still on track? I think that's just a timeout that needs to be called by somebody in the organization. And here's the thing. I don't think your comms person is going to solve it. I don't think your HR person is going to solve it. I think, again, I think there's a level of complexity that doesn't get handled in most organizations when it talks about this behavioral complexity at scale.
You bring up so many good points. The parallels between customer and employee experience are so prominent as we look at it. And, if you look at the parallels, here are a couple examples. One, the way that we measure customer satisfaction has evolved to this effort orientation, from CSAT to Net Promoter, would you recommend me, to how difficult or easy was it for you to achieve whatever experience you achieved. And the same is happening in the employee side, right? We're seeing that same employee transformation where it's all about effort to do whatever it is they're doing in their job. The way that we measure is evolving similarly on a similar path. And it was Elizabeth Dixon, author, former Chick-fil-A executive, delivered a keynote, and she made this comment that stuck with me, and that is, your customer experience will never be greater than your employee experience. And it stuck with me so prominently. And
right.
Yeah, and so that one of the new trends that we're watching right now is this whole concept of creating adaptive customer experiences. And that is the ability to transform across channel. It's seamless, it's frictionless, so on and so forth. Well, we need to think about that similarly on the employee side. That's another parallel that's coming down the path here. How can we create an adaptive employee experience as part of the change management process? It just kind of circled around in my brain as I was thinking about things you were talking about.
Well, it's interesting. You talk about Chick-fil-A, who they just crush it and crush it and crush it and crush it. And, the consistency of service experience that comes from them is just wow. Southwest Airlines had a similar idea. Like, we're going to take care of our own first. And if we do that, the customers are going to feel it and be happy anyway. And that's some really different thinking. But I will say this relative to when we talk about engagement and we talk about the role in the field and whatnot. Here's the other thing that I think most of us have come to know who've been around for a minute, which is, especially in the retention and talent game, you quit the boss first, you quit the team second, you quit the organization third. And so a lot of the work that we do relative to influence and change and helping people go faster here at Banding is even that, how do I optimize that one-on-one relationship?
Interesting.
Because, if I can get you to clarity, Gerardo, quickly and differently, I do it for you, John, I now am scaling myself. I can now set it and forget it, set the mix and let you go do, because I know that we got to clarity and alignment, and I can go on to the next thing and the next person and maybe be more strategic. And so I do think in service industries where you have, and especially like hourly frontline folks, even just the idea of how we're looking at talent, and not to take us down talent rabbit hole, but like, again, that, I talk over and over to people who go, major big box retailer. I was talking to a gentleman we hope to partner with soon, who said, it's like the person that can unload the truck the fastest gets, promoted to the supervisor. They might not be the person that's going to help others want to stay. And I think that's also a really kind of interesting idea. And we can actually look even in the research and like the personality stuff to go, look, this person right here who was super fast and super amazing is going to have to work so hard and swim upstream to drive the engagement that you want because it's just not natural for them. And here's a blend of traits that says they're just going to naturally do this. And you're not, yes, they'll need development, but not the same level. You're not turning a dog into a cat.
And I mean, honestly, I could talk about this with the two of you for hours. But being cognizant of time, there's one more thing that I want to pick your brain on, and that's double clicking on clarity. How to get everybody on the same clarity. I may feel that I'm very clear about something, and my wife, not that this is a real example by any means, but it's in a completely different clarity about the same topic, right? Are there any examples? And I see the guitars behind you. I don't know if the question and the background are correlated. Any examples that you can share with us about how to achieve the same clarity within a team in order to be successful during this change transition?
Well, that is a great question. And what I'm going to share is either going to make some people feel really great or feel a little overwhelmed. So I'm going to approach it gingerly. Again, we're talking about really deep complexity. I mean, look, I can sit next to someone on a plane and ask them a few questions and in 30 seconds understand how I need to communicate and where I can push and where I can't. And that's something that's taken a long time. And I'm not suggesting you need that. What I will say is this: getting to a place of, for starters, are we seeing the same thing for starters? If there is conflict going on, if something doesn't feel good to one of you, there's misalignment. And again, in the conflict and misalignment game, and this was the biggest shift for me also from a leadership perspective, and I still work at this every day with our team. When things aren't going the way we want them, we have a tendency to go them. I have learned to do this. What is my part? Like I can't control what either of you gentlemen do in this conversation, but I can control. The only spectrum of control that I have in this conversation is I know what I can do to attempt strategically to get to clarity with both of you, one of you, any of you, right? And so the idea of, if things aren't feeling right or good for anybody, that's already your first indicator. That's your first signal that there's just misalignment and there's not clarity. And so when there is that kind of misalignment and conflict, we have a tendency to want to convince the other person. We want to prove our point. We want to make statements. And the most powerful thing that we've ever learned around here, especially in the influence game, to get to clarity is turn it into a question. And sometimes it could be like, hey, does this feel good for you? Because this doesn't really feel good for me. Oh, yeah. Okay. This doesn't feel good. Okay, good. We're both experiencing the same thing. All right. Well, let's start thinking about what it is that's making you this way. Oh, well, Gerardo, you said this. Oh, no, I didn't mean that. By the way, there's something that we habit banding that we teach all our clients at the end of every exchange. And it's called giving each other a hand. And I'll get a graphic and I'll share this with you all to share out. At the end of every meeting, this is what I heard. And you would be amazed, right? This is what I heard, John. And you're like, no, that's not why I said, okay, that's what I heard. Give you an opportunity to get to clarity. A, this is what we agreed to. No, okay, wait a minute. We agreed to this. Does that mean you said ASAP? Does that mean Thursday? Or what does ASAP mean for you? Right? So this is what I heard. This is what we agreed to. This is the next step. This is the agreed upon next step. And then D is, here's how we're documenting it. And in the manager direct report game, that is game changing from what we understand from our client partners. Something so simple, right? So simple. But again, the other thing is this, just framing up, hey, how do we get to clarity so we can get aligned is different. That's just a different foundational way to start the conversation to get to clarity. But you have to make the goal clarity for both of you, not one.
Mhm.
I love these viewpoints, Alan. Please go ahead, Gerardo.
I was going to say that it signals a mature way of dealing with confrontation, so that it's not me imposing something, but it speaks to when the organization, the teams have reached a maturity level to take it to a happy outcome. John, unless you have other questions, I'd like to learn a little bit more about Alan from the personal side before we wrap up.
Sure.
Before we go personal,
yes.
because that is going to be cool for our audience. I just want to stay on the thread that we were just on for one more moment, a double click, and that is on this purpose for change, finding clarity. You're talking about. We've heard a lot from service leaders on previous discussions around understanding the language of what that change is, who that change is impacting, and then personalizing the change to that party. So do you believe in the importance of that aspect of that? I mean, maybe you could talk a little bit about that part of it.
Yeah. Well, when I hear that, I hear like, okay, we're making this record now, and here's why.
Yeah.
Yeah. And by the way, and here's the role that you play in contributing to the sound. I mean, it's I don't mean to make it sound simple, but I mean to make it sound simple. And so again, here's what's so interesting though, also in our experience, and again, in the conflict and influencing game, the why and what is not super hard to align around. The real friction comes from the how, because, for all the reasons you would expect, but getting to the why and the what is crucial. The how, there's going to be a lot of different opinions on how to get from point A to point B. But if you're invited to the conversation early on, you might not love where that outcome lands, but you just can't complain about it toxically in the same way. You just can't without looking foolish and self-serving.
Gerardo, back to you. We can land on getting to know Alan a little bit better. I just wanted to double click on that thread because I think it's an important one. We continue to hear a lot about it. So,
I'm glad you asked the question. And so, Alan, I'm going to challenge you a little bit on a compliment you threw us at the front end of the call. You said you really enjoyed getting to know the service councils community, that you've learned a lot. And I'm obviously, you were there in last year's conference. Shameless plug. I'm very happy that you're going to be there as well.
I can't wait.
This year, September 9 through 11 in Chicago. So the challenge is, what are one or two specific things that you've learned from the community that you've found valuable from these interactions?
Yeah, and that's a great question. And I'll tell you, what's so funny? So I walked in, I had no idea what I was walking into. And look, first of all, I have to give a shout out to Pete Seward, because Pete was a client of ours at Ocean Spray, and just someone that I've just really enjoyed getting to know over the years and consider a friend. And he told me about the Service Council and connected me with John. And I had no idea. I think I was coming from a speech that I did in Florida the week before. And I just stumbled into this thing, and I go into the advisory board meeting, and like the first person I see is David Nauer, who, and David is, and I just thought, wow, what's happening here? Because this is a gentleman who I hadn't seen in years, who was just an incredible advocate and supporter and mentor for me when I was starting banding. And, but I listened in the room, I watched the panels, and I thought to myself, wow, I don't think most consumers really understand the scale and magnitude of what is happening to even get that tech in your house to fix your thing. And what's really interesting, and I've shared this with John, so like I moved, and I had someone, I'm not going to mention the company, but I had someone come out to wire up my place for internet. And it was pretty interesting because I think it's just going to be this easy thing. First, they say, oh, that address is fine. We're just going to give you a modem and you can just plug it up and go. Famous last words, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm experiencing that. That doesn't work. Then they send someone out and I couldn't find the jack in the wall. And there was they renovated this place and they glossed over it. So they send one person out. He can't solve it. They send a second person out, and this is interesting. First thing they do is they check the other person's work as if they just missed it, And I'm sure that happens, right? And then it's still, so I don't know what to tell you. And I'm like, okay, I've now driven 40 minutes twice for something that feels like it should be simple. And now I'm a little irritated because I'm busy and my time is expensive. And then they send out the third person. And the second that he walked in the door and I said, I don't think you know what you're in for, bro. He goes, try me. And I was like, hey, now, who are you? And he goes, okay. I said, you don't seem right. He goes, we're going to figure it out. And he found some other place, crawl space in the building next to me to do whatever. And he got it done. And I said, man, you are a rock star. And I shared with him, I said, I never really appreciated what you all do. And the only thing I can compare it to is like the concert of the military. Like when I literally being in the theater of war, playing for the troops in Iraq in the Second Gulf War, and just the amount of logistics and things to make some moment of important truth happen is so profound. And I don't think most consumers understand it. And quite frankly, they don't care. They just want their thing easy and fixed. And they want you to show up on time and they want your expectations managed. And so even when I get for the electrician that I'm getting texted emails and I can see where they are on the way. And that makes me feel good as a consumer versus the other person who I sit for a window for 12 hours and they never show up. I mean, all this I have a much greater understanding of. And so that's been really cool. And I share that with people like, hey, things are it's just not that easy. But also I've come to, become really good friends with a lot of people in the community that I will be lifelong friends now. And I cannot wait to get back to Chicago, just see people and meet new people. So I really appreciate the invite into your great community.
We can't wait either, Alan. And I'll tell you, your personal experience of that internet setup, service leaders are like cringing, saying, why wasn't there better triage and diagnosis? Why did we have to repeat visit? What about mean time to repair? So all the metrics and things we talk about day in and day out, it's so resonant with what they encounter as service leaders. So your personal experience there is right in line with the plight of today's service leader. And second to that, technicians, frontline agents, field service engineers, they do wear capes. They are so cool. They are awesome.
I mean, just think about it. You're never walking in because everything's great.
Yeah. Yep.
You're never walking in because everything's great. You're walking in to solve a problem, and usually someone's not happy about the problem.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Gerardo, any closing thoughts?
Just to wrap us up, Alan, can you share outside of all the nuggets that you've given? Very thoughtful again. Perhaps one personal passion outside of work or something that you're looking forward to in the next couple of months.
Well, I'll tell you this. One of my friends here in San Diego invited me to go jam tomorrow, Friday afternoon with. Cool. So we're just gonna go play music in someone's garage, which is just incredible for me. But I'm pretty passionate about hiking out here in San Diego, sunsets. I like good food, and it's funny, as a guy that was rocking and rolling. Took a long time for me to get back into the love of the game of going to shows, but I go to a lot of concerts. I just saw a thing called Wonderfront and saw Beck and The Roots and all these great bands. And so, it's funny. I don't have a ton of hobbies because they're these things like music and behavior. They're all just sort of my passions and they all kind of blend together, Yeah, I'm starting to get into swimming also,
Cool.
challenging myself on the swimming side and trying to keep it off instead of having to take it off at this age. And one last thing also, for those, for those listening, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn and say hello. And if you need further clarity, I spend a lot of time, I answer my own, emails. And if you need any clarity on anything, I'm happy to share it.
That's great. I'll say this much, pun intended, but you've influenced the way I think about the topics that we discussed today.
Oh,
I'm sure you've done it with a lot of our listeners. So let's land there. John, wanna close us down?
Yeah, happily. So thank you to our listening and participating audience. He is Alan Schaefer. He's the CEO and founder of Banding People Together. He will be keynoting, emceeing. He's going to be peppered across the symposium. Yeah, absolutely. So September 9th through the 11th. Mark your calendars, save the date, come join us and Alan out in Chicago for 3 days. Really setting up to be our best event and agenda yet. Really proud of what we put together as a team. And this resource will be available to you on whatever podcast channel you subscribe to or at our website or our LinkedIn page. Thank you for joining today. Alan, this has been wonderful. Thank you for enriching our community. Really appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me. Appreciate you guys.